On episode 18 of Office Hours with Dr. Guy, we talk about oral defense. Bring your questions to Office Hours with Dr. Guy. Hey everybody, it's Dr. Guy, founder of the dissertationmentor.com and author of The Dissertation Warrior, and I'm so excited that you are here again for another episode of Office Hours, where today we talk about one of the most sought after topics that's been discussed here on my channel lately, which is what is oral defense and how you can prepare for it. So let's get straight into your questions. Sirisha asks, what happens at an oral defense? Is it like a firing squad? Hi Sirisha, welcome to the show. An oral defense is a scholarly conversation between experts. You are the expert in the room. For the persons that are sitting there with you, and of all the people that are in that room, you are the chief expert in your topic, and most specifically, you're the chief expert in your study. So every single person that might be in that room, such as your chair, your advisor, your other committee members, and even the visitors that might be there, they know a little less than you do about the research study that you've conducted. Now, chances are these are very accomplished people in their respective fields, so they do have expertise, but you are the expert in your research, and that's the number one thing you need to know when you walk into that room. If your chair, your advisor, and your committee are human beings worth their salt, they will not permit you to be in that room unless you are absolutely able to successfully defend your dissertation. Now, it doesn't mean that you will successfully defend your dissertation, and I'll talk about the outcomes of that in just a second. It is possible to not defend well, but they would not put you in that room, at least if they're good people, unless you are absolutely able to be successful. So in that regard, Sirisha, no, it is not a firing squad, but an oral defense is something that you should prepare for. An oral defense is a scholarly conversation between experts. And so as you're walking into that room, here's what you should expect. A strong chair, a strong advisor will provide the framework for the time there. They will set an agenda, and most likely the agenda will look something like this. About 15 to 25, sometimes longer, minutes are used for a presentation that is made on your part. You will be presenting the findings of your study along with the basics of your study, why you did it, what led you to do it, and what did you find accordingly. And then the minutes after that are going to, and sometimes this can go from 30 minutes to an hour, is a set of questions that are being asked by your committee members, by your advisor, and if the public or if it's an open defense, then other people might be able to attend as well, an audience, and they will have questions for you as well. The purpose of having these questions is not to be proven wrong, not to prove you wrong, or to prove that somehow you don't know any answers. So in that regard, again, it's not a firing squad. The purpose of that conversation, and everyone that's watching this, if you get one thing from this video today, the whole purpose of an oral defense is one, to present your great work, but also it's for you to engage in the scholarly conversation that you're going to be expected to engage in as a practitioner, as a scholar in the months and years and decades to come. So as you're sitting amongst soon-to-be peers in the doctoral world, that is your advisor, your advisor and your committee members, they are going to be engaging you, and it's much less of a gotcha and more like a can you roll with us in a way. Now this should not detour from the severity and the importance of an oral defense. You must be absolutely impeccably prepared, Sirisha, for that oral defense, and so that when they ask you a question, you are able to talk about why it was most appropriate that you did what you did in your study. And that way you can do justice to the human beings and the organizations that were involved in you completing and conducting your study. So that's really the basics of an oral defense. As an added piece of that, it's also an opportunity to reflect upon your doctoral journey and for you to plot the course of where you're going to be going in the days, months, years to come. And that to me is the best part of the oral defense, is that second when you walk in and I as chair or whoever's the chair gets to say, "Welcome Dr. Sirisha," for the first time. And then we get to hear about what you're going to be up to in the coming season of your life now that you're done with this thing. JT asks, how do I prepare for my oral defense? JT, welcome to the show. Number one, you need to talk to your advisor in your chair, even if you're early on in the proposal stage, and just inquire of them at some point. What is the typical structure of an oral defense look like at your university? And if there is a presentation that is going to happen, which I'm 99% sure there is, you're going to ask for a PowerPoint template or at least an outline from them of what that's going to look like. And they might be somewhat surprised if you're early on in the process, you asking for that outline. But in my view, it's very useful to begin with the end in mind and to know where you're headed, because you're going to be telling a story in your research. You're going to be telling a story in your oral defense. When you get into your oral defense, as you prepare for your oral defense, create a slide deck, and it tells a multi-part story. In fact, it tells a three-part story. I was a practitioner out in the field, and I was not a doctoral student yet. And I noticed something. And then I became a doctoral person, and I started to do some research about this idea. And this led me to this specific study that I'm conducting. And so you tell them at that point about the study, and that's the majority of your time in your oral defense, in your presentation, that is. And then you finish the story by saying, and now that I know this, as a scholarly practitioner, now that I know the results of this study, here are the steps I'm going to go and I'm going to do as a scholar now, and as a practitioner in my field, as an expert in my field, as a leader in my field, to better mankind as a result of what I found. So notice that this is a three-part story, and so you need to learn how to tell that story, JT. So my hope would be, after your chair provides you some outline, you can start creating sort of that three-part story. I would suggest talking to a friend about it and saying to your friend, I'm working on my dissertation. Can I tell you why I'm doing this? And they're going to reluctantly say, sure, buy me coffee. And after you buy them some coffee and they're drinking it, you can say to them, I was a non-doctoral person and I was noticing something out there in my practice. And then I became a doctoral person. I started doing some research about this, and here's what I discovered. And then I started doing this research, and here's what I found. And as you get closer to the end of your dissertation work, that story is going to become more informed, and you're going to become more the expert. The number two way that you can prepare, JT, for oral defense is to look for sample oral defense questions. And on thedissertationmentor.com, I have a tab up there that says Start Here. And under the Start Here tab, there's an oral defense section, and there is a small sample of some questions that I would say would be valuable for any doctoral student to start considering now early in the process. For people that are part of my Accelerator program, they get access to a whole slew of questions that I ask, and I have plans in the near future to release more videos about some sample oral defense questions here. But long story short, go to thedissertationmentor.com and check out my Start Here tab, where I have a list of questions in the oral defense section to help start preparing you. The number three way, JT, that you need to prepare for your oral defense, even if you're further down the line, that is, you are ready to be preparing to defend your dissertation, is you need to rehearse that presentation. You need to rehearse that, in my view. I mean, every person's different, but in my view, you should rehearse that at least twice, and better yet, 3 times. Get your timing down. That's the number one thing. And then have a person that is a trusted ally that's perhaps at the same level as you in a doctoral program, maybe even a mentor, and have them ask you naive and difficult questions about your dissertation. I often find that it's those naive questions about your dissertation where they don't really know much about it at all, and they can force you to explain why you chose your methodology, why you chose to survey those people that you chose to survey, why you chose to look at these sources over other sources. And these are the type of questions that can often get people hung up in their oral defense. And so my hope is that people People that you trust can ask you those difficult questions, so that way you're not surprised when your chair does. Paula asks, what if I don't have an answer to their questions? Hi Paula, welcome to the show. There are going to be questions in your oral defense that you don't know the answer to. The question really, in my view, is on average, do you know most of the answers, or do you have a response to most of the questions being answered? And for those questions that you don't have the answer to, how do you roll with that situation? The oral defense in part are those people in your committee, your chair, looking at how you react to this type of pressure and how you can respond in a scholarly conversation to questions you don't have the answer to. There are some questions that you need to know the answer to, always. Some of those questions are things like, why did you choose the methodology that you chose? What is the basic logic of why we are studying this? What was the research problem that was out there in the world? What is the research gap that you're attempting to fill? What was your purpose statement, your research questions? Why were research questions worded the way that they were? And why did you choose these specific resources to go into your literature review over others? And many other questions. When asked a question that you don't know the answer to, in life generally, how do you answer? How do you deal with that situation? And in general, my feeling is if you're comfortable, you're working with friends, it's not a huge deal. You talk it out. You look for resources together. You might even ask clarifying questions of someone that's asking a question of you. It's the same way in oral defense. It is possible to ask some questions back of your chair and of the committee members asking questions. Some guidelines I think are very helpful. Number one, don't answer a question unless you know in general what's being asked. So if the wording of a question might be able to be altered such that you understand it a little bit better, ask a clarifying question. It's okay to do that. Second, it is possible that when you are asked a question and you don't quite get it, I recommend using good communication skills and repeating the question back and saying, this is the question that I'm hearing, right? Is that the question you'd like me to answer? And you can put it on them to provide you a little bit more clarification as to the question you're answering. In the event you're absolutely stuck, say that's something you hadn't considered, and then ask them a clarifying question to see if you can get closer to the concern that they have. Ask them questions themselves. Ask questions of your committee themselves. It's okay to have a conversation in a conversation. It is not like a courtroom where you are being forced to answer questions and there's no back and forth communication, at least not generally. And overall, Paula, what I want you to understand is that there are different outcomes that can come out of an oral defense. I mean, chiefly, usually at most universities, there's approved with no revisions, there's approved with minor revisions, there's major revisions, and then there is the fail levels. And a major revision would be considered a fail, but it's like a fail with a pause. Fail is something was brought out in the course of the oral defense that most likely might result in you not finishing your doctoral degree. Plagiarism, falsification of data, dishonesty of some kind, these are the common things that might result in a failure. But the worst I've ever seen personally in the room was a major revision, and I was not a member of that committee. It was somewhat of a shock. But the majority of the committees I've sat on were approved with minor revisions, a paragraph or two or a page, take a day or two and finish that revision and send it to your chair. Or I've seen zero revisions at all. To get ready to place yourself in the position to have no revisions and minor revisions, you need to have continued great conversations and relationships with your committee members and your chair in advance, so that way you understand what their questions are of your study before you're in the room. And this is like a make or break situation. So the best way to prepare is to have a great relationship with your chair and your committee, and in such a space that they can continue to ask you questions over your doctoral journey, so that way they're not completely in the dark in the end, and you're unable to see what type of questions might be coming. There are questions that you can't anticipate. A question I got in my oral defense that was shocking, and I didn't expect it coming, was one of the most wisest professors in our department. He walked into the room, and I remember my chair walking up to me and saying, "Don't panic, Dr. Such and Such is here." And I felt the panic because Dr. Such and Such was a wizard. He was like the Wizard of Oz. He knew all. And when he walked in and he asked me this question, he said, "You chose a postmodern mode of assessment. Why didn't you choose a postmodern or information age question or assessment method for my survey?" And I did not expect that question. And I had to ask him a clarifying question. But through the course of because we had an existing relationship, and because this was a scholarly conversation where it was possible for us to engage in a back and forth, we were able to come to an accord, and we were able to understand one another. And that, to me, is the best way to see an oral defense, where people are coming together to understand the great work that you've already done. So that way we can learn, and so that way we can better your study, and that way we can better the opportunity to benefit those human beings that you're seeking to assist by doing your research. Well, everybody, that was episode 18 of Office Hours with Dr. Guy. Episode 19 is going to be something truly special, so make sure that you subscribe below and hit that notification bell. If you're one of my lovely people here on Instagram, what I'd like you to do is make sure you follow me. You are not going to want to miss episode 19. Below in the comments, please do leave me a question that your chair has asked that has absolutely stumped you. And I want to see if I can provide some clues as to how to answer it if you don't know the answer already. And so that way I can prepare an amazing document of great oral defense questions for you. Beautiful team, I believe in you. Keep working towards finishing this dissertation. Great things are coming as long as you keep making just one step every single day. Just one step is better than no steps.